When my mother saw me shivering on the freezing subway platform holding my two crying children, she asked one simple question. Why are you not driving the $200,000 Range Rover I bought you? I looked at her rainwater dripping from my nose and soaking into my cheap coat and whispered that my husband gave the keys to his brother-in-law because he said I did not deserve it. She did not scream. She did not rush to hug me. She just smoothed her faded dress, which I knew hid a black card with a $5 million limit, and said two words. Do not worry. By tomorrow night, they will wish they had walked barefoot on broken glass. Before I tell you how my mother and I reclaimed my life, and left my in-laws with nothing but their pride and a foreclosure notice, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind someone exactly who signed the checks. I am Ebony, 33 years old, and up until 48 hours ago, I thought I was doing the right thing by playing small to keep my husband feeling big. But standing in the torrential Atlanta rain outside the Peachtree Center station, I realized my humility had been my death sentence. The rain was not just falling, it was attacking us. My 5-year-old son Malik was sobbing into my leg, his sneakers soaked through because I had left his rain boots in the trunk of the car I no longer possessed. My 7-year-old daughter Aisha was trying to be brave, shielding her head with a math workbook, but I could see her shivering. I approached the turnstile, my hands shaking from the cold and the sheer exhaustion of carrying a toddler and 3 backpacks. I tapped my debit card against the reader. It beeped. A red light flashed. Insufficient funds. I stared at the small screen blinking away the rainwater. That was impossible. I had deposited my paycheck 3 days ago. I tapped it again. Insufficient funds. A line of impatient commuters began to form behind me, grumbling about the holdup. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app with trembling fingers. My stomach dropped through the floor. The balance read $0.00. A notification from 30 minutes ago sat on my lock screen. Transfer initiated to joint account. Terrence. He had drained my personal checking account, every single dime. He had left me stranded in a storm with 2 children and no way to get home. The humiliation burned hotter than the cold rain. I had to step out of the line, dragging my confused children to a metal bench near the wall, trying to hide my face as people stared at the woman who could not even afford a subway ride. That was when I saw her. Mama Estella was sitting on the opposite bench, reading a discarded newspaper. To anyone else, she looked like just another elderly woman struggling to get by. She wore a worn-out wool coat that had seen better days, scuffed orthopedic shoes, and a knit hat pulled low over her graying hair. Nobody gave her a second glance. Nobody knew that Estella Vance owned 3 commercial skyscrapers in downtown Atlanta and held the mortgage notes on half the businesses in this district. She preferred to move in silence, riding the subway to keep her ear to the ground, checking on her properties without the fanfare of a limousine. She lowered the newspaper slowly. Her sharp, dark eyes took in the scene. She saw the puddle forming around my cheap shoes. She saw her grandchildren shivering. She saw the red declined message still flashing on the turnstile screen. She did not rush over to save me. That was not her way. She waited for me to walk to her. I approached her, shame lodging a lump in my throat so big I could barely breathe. "Mama," I whispered. She folded the newspaper meticulously. "Where is the autobiography, Ebony? The car I had custom ordered for your 30th birthday. The one with the massage seat so my grandbabies would never be cold." Terrence took the keys. I managed to choke out, wiping water from Malik's face. He said Brad and LaToya needed it for a networking event. He said it was dangerous for me to drive in the rain. He said I should take the train to save the environment. Mama Estella looked at me. Her expression was unreadable, but the air around her seemed to drop 10 degrees. "And the money?" "He transferred it," I admitted, my voice breaking. "He said he needed liquidity for an investment." Mama Estella stood up. She was a small woman, but in that moment, she looked 10 feet tall. I told you 5 years ago, Ebony, if you marry a man who sees you as a wallet, do not be surprised when you end up empty. You have a master's degree in finance, you run the supply chain for a pharmaceutical giant, yet you stand here looking like a beggar because you are afraid to bruise a man's ego. She reached into her battered purse. I expected her to pull out cash. Instead, she pulled out a handkerchief. It was pure Hermes silk vintage worth more than $500. It was the only hint of her true status. She handed it to me. Dry your face, she commanded. You look like a victim. Vances are not victims. We are architects. She tapped her transit card on the reader for us, the sound of the beep echoing like a gunshot. Get on the train, Ebony. Tonight you cry. Tomorrow we collect the debt. But to understand why I was standing in a puddle of my own despair, I need to take you back 48 hours. I need to take you to the dinner table where my marriage officially died. It was Tuesday evening. I had just come home after a 12-hour shift. I had exciting news I wanted to share. I had been promoted to Chief Financial Officer of the Southeast Division, a position that came with a salary bump that would put me in the top 1% of earners in the state. But I knew the rules of my house. I had to dim my light so my husband Terrence would not be blinded. Terrence had been unemployed for 3 years, claiming he was building a cryptocurrency startup. In reality, he spent his days playing video games and listening to podcasts about alpha males. When I walked through the door carrying 2 bags of groceries and my laptop case, he did not look up from the television. Neither did Brad. Brad was my sister-in-law, Latoya's husband. He was a white man who had married into our family and somehow decided he was the expert on the African-American experience. He was sitting at my dining table, his muddy boots propped up on the mahogany surface I had polished that morning. He was drinking my imported beer and laughing at something on the screen. "Hey, babe," Terrence said, not moving a muscle to help me with the bags. "What is for dinner? Brad is hungry." I set the groceries down, my back aching. "I made a pot of gumbo," I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful. "Also, Terrence, have you seen my car keys? I left them in the bowl by the door, but they are gone." Terrence finally looked away from the TV. "Oh yeah, I gave them to Brad." I froze. "You what?" Brad took a long swig of beer and burped loudly. "Yeah, thanks for that, Ebony. Latoya and I have this gala to go to in Buckhead tomorrow. We really need to make an impression. Showing up in my Honda Civic just does not send the right message of generational wealth, you know." I looked at Brad, then at Terrence. "That is my car," I said slowly. "My mother gave that to me. It is not a community vehicle. And Brad, you are not even on the insurance." Brad chuckled, a condescending sound that made my skin crawl. He swung his legs off the table and leaned forward, looking at me like I was a slow child. "See, this is the problem with you, Ebony. You get a little corporate job and you forget your roots. In our culture, and yes, I say our culture, because I am part of this family now, we share. We lift each other up. You holding onto that car while your sister-in-law struggles to build her brand. That is selfish. You are acting real bougie right now." My blood began to boil. A white man sitting in the house I paid for, eating the food I bought, telling me I was acting bougie for not wanting him to drive my $200,000 vehicle. "Terrence," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "get my keys. Now." Terrence stood up, but instead of supporting me, he stepped between me and Brad. "Ebony, stop it. You are embarrassing me. Brad is right. You take the train to work anyway. You do not need the Rover to park in a garage all day. It is wasteful. Tasha and Brad can put it to better use." "I am not asking, Terrence," I said, stepping toward the counter where I saw the key fob glinting next to Brad's elbow. I reached for the keys. Terrence grabbed my wrist. His grip was tight, painful. "Stop being a brat, Ebony," he hissed. I tried to yank my hand back. In the struggle, my elbow hit the pot of boiling hot gumbo I had just placed on the trivet. The pot tipped. Scalding hot liquid splashed over my hand and wrist. I screamed, the pain instantaneous and blinding. The heavy ceramic pot shattered on the floor, sending shrimp and dark roux splattering across the pristine white tiles and onto Brad's boots. My hand was red and blistering. I clutched it to my chest, tears springing to my eyes. But Terrence did not look at my hand. He did not ask if I was okay. He dove for the floor, snatching the key fob out of a puddle of gumbo before it could get damaged. Thank God, Terrence breathed, wiping the sauce off the remote. The electronics are okay. Brad catch. He tossed the keys to Brad. Brad stood up, shaking gumbo off his boot with a look of disgust. Look at this mess, Ebony. You really need to work on your temper. Come on, Terrence, let's get out of here before she breaks something else. They walked out. My husband and his brother-in-law walked out the front door, laughing, while I stood in the middle of my kitchen nursing a second-degree burn, surrounded by the wreckage of the dinner I had cooked for them. That was the moment the old Ebony died. But as I stood there watching the taillights of my Range Rover fade down the driveway, I did not know that 48 hours later, standing in the rain with Mama Estella, the new Ebony, would be born. And she would be terrifying. I stood by the front window of my living room watching the digital clock on the cable box tick past midnight. My stomach was twisted into tight, painful knots. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the Atlanta streets slick and black under the streetlights, but the storm inside me was just beginning to brew. I had been pacing for 3 hours calling my husband Terrence and his sister LaToya, but both of their phones went straight to voicemail. My anxiety was not just about the car. It was about the disrespect. It was about the fact that I, a grown woman who managed multi-million-dollar logistics contracts for a pharmaceutical empire, was being treated like a child in my own home. I had paid the down payment. I paid the monthly insurance premiums. Yet I was the one pacing the floor while they were out joyriding in my property. Finally, at 12:15 in the morning, I saw the distinct LED headlights of my Range Rover Autobiography swing around the corner. My heart leaped, then immediately sank. The car did not glide into the driveway with the smooth elegance it was designed for. Instead, it swerved aggressively, mounting the curb with a sickening crunch of metal against concrete before jerking to a halt halfway onto the grass. I threw the front door open and marched out into the humid night air. My hands were shaking not from cold, but from a rage I was struggling to suppress. The driver's side door opened, and LaToya stepped out. She was wearing a tight sequined dress that looked cheap under the porch lights, and she was stumbling slightly. She did not look apologetic. She looked annoyed that I was standing there. "You are late," I said, my voice trembling. "You said you just needed it for the gala. The gala ended 4 hours ago." LaToya rolled her eyes, slamming the heavy door of my luxury SUV with enough force to shake the frame. "Oh my God, Ebony. Do you ever stop complaining? We went to an after-party. You cannot show up to a gala and just leave. That is not how networking works. Not that you would know since you spend all your time in that little cubicle of yours." She tried to push past me to get into the house, but I stepped in her path. I needed to inspect my car. I walked around to the passenger side, and my breath hitched in my throat. There, running from the front headlight all the way back to the rear passenger door, was a deep, jagged white scratch. It cut through the pristine obsidian black paint like a scar. It looked like she had sideswiped a concrete pillar or a metal fence. "LaToya," I gasped, running my finger over the gouge. It was deep. It had gone through the clear coat and the paint down to the primer. "What did you do to my car?" LaToya glanced at it over her shoulder, barely pausing. "Oh, that. Some idiot parked too close to me at the club. It is barely noticeable. You have insurance, right? Just file a claim. Stop being so dramatic." Barely noticeable. It was a $3,000 repair job minimum. I yanked the passenger door open to check the interior, and the smell hit me like a physical blow. My car, which still had that distinct rich smell of new leather and expensive detailing, now smelled like a dumpster behind a dive bar. The scent of stale cigarette smoke, menthol, and greasy French fries wafted out. I looked at the floor mats. The custom sheepskin mats I had ordered from England were covered in mud. There were 2 empty boxes of chicken nuggets crushed into the carpet, grease stains soaking into the fibers. A half-drunk milkshake had been spilled in the cup holder, the sticky pink liquid dripping down onto the center console where the gear shift was. And in the ashtray, which I had never used, there were 3 cigarette butts. "You smoked in my car," I whispered, staring at the ash on my leather seats. "I told you, LaToya. I specifically told you this is a non-smoking vehicle. The smell gets into the headliner. It never comes out." LaToya let out a harsh, mocking laugh. She leaned against the hood of my car, crossing her arms. "You know you are really ungrateful. I took this car out and gave it some exposure. A car like this needs to be seen. It needs to be driven hard to break in the engine. You drive it like a grandma. You should be thanking me for running the rotaries for you. Besides, Brad said the smoke gives it character." I felt tears pricking my eyes. It was not the damage. It was the violation. It was the absolute certainty that she did not care about me or my property. "Get your trash out," I said, my voice rising. "Get your trash out of my car right now, LaToya. And you are paying for the detailer. And the paint job." Suddenly, the front door of the house opened. Terrence stood there, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He was wearing his silk pajamas, the ones I had bought him for Christmas. "What is going on out here?" he grumbled. "Ebony, why are you screaming? The neighbors are going to call the cops." "Terrence." "Look at this," I shouted, pointing at the scratch. "Look at the inside of my car. She trashed it. She wrecked the paint, and she smoked inside." Terrence walked down the driveway in his slippers. He barely glanced at the scratch. He looked at LaToya, who immediately put on a pouty face, acting like the victim. "Terrence," she whined. "Your wife is attacking me. I did her a favor by driving this tank for her, and she is screaming at me over a little scratch. I told her I would pay the deductible, but she is acting like I killed someone. Tell her to calm down." Terrence turned to me. His face was hard. He did not look at the damage. He looked at me with that familiar disappointment that always made me feel small. "Ebony, seriously. It is 2 in the morning. It is just a car. It is a machine. It can be fixed. Why do you always have to ruin the vibe?" LaToya had a big night. She made some important connections for Brad's business. You should be supporting that, not crying over some dirt. "Dirt," I choked out. "Terrence, there is milkshake in the gear shift. There is a gash on the side." "So, clean it," Terrence snapped. I froze. "Excuse me, clean it?" He repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Brad has a breakfast meeting with a venture capitalist at 8 in the morning. He needs the Rover. He cannot show up in a dirty car. It looks unprofessional." I stared at him. "You want me to give the car back to Brad after this? And you want me to clean up their mess?" Terrence sighed, running a hand over his face, like dealing with me was the most exhausting job in the world. "Look, Ebony. Brad is on the verge of a breakthrough. If he closes this deal, we all win. We are a family. We pitch in. LaToya is tired. I am tired. You are the only one making a big deal out of this, so you fix it. There is a bucket and a hose in the garage. Make sure it shines before you come to bed." He turned around and put his arm around LaToya. "Come on, sis. Let's get you some water. Ignore her. She is just having one of her moods." LaToya shot me a triumphant smirk over her shoulder as they walked back into the warmth of my house. She mouthed the word pathetic before disappearing inside. The door clicked shut and the porch light flicked off, plunging me into darkness. I stood there in the driveway alone. The silence of the night was deafening. I looked at my beautiful car, the symbol of my hard work, my success, the one thing I had bought just for me. It looked violated. It looked like trash. Slowly, numbly, I walked to the garage. I found the bucket. I found the sponge. I turned on the hose. The water was freezing cold against my hands, stinging the burn I had gotten from the gumbo 2 nights ago. I began to scrub. I scrubbed the mud off the tires. I picked the greasy nugget boxes off the floor and threw them into the trash can. I used a toothbrush to scrape the dried milkshake out of the crevices of the gear shift. I sprayed half a bottle of odor eliminator to try and mask the smell of cheap tobacco. As I washed the side of the car, my sponge snagged on the jagged edge of the scratch. I stopped. I traced the wound in the metal. Tears finally spilled over hot and fast, mixing with the soapy water on my cheeks. I was crying not because of the work. I was crying because I realized Terrence was right. We were a family. But in this family, I was not the wife. I was not the partner. I was the staff. I was the bank account. I was the maid. I scrubbed until my knuckles were raw. I scrubbed until the sun began to turn the sky a bruise-colored purple over the Atlanta skyline. And with every circle of the sponge, a cold, hard resolve began to form in the pit of my stomach. They wanted me to clean. Fine. I would clean. But I would not just clean the car. I was going to clean house. I finished wiping down the windshield just as the first light of dawn hit the glass. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number I had not called in months. "Mama," I whispered when she picked up on the first ring. "I am at the train station," she said, her voice sharp and awake. "Bring the children. Leave the car keys on the counter. It is time." The vibration of the bass from my living room floorboards traveled up through the soles of my feet, shaking my entire skeleton. It was 6 in the evening on a Wednesday. I had just walked through the front door after a 10-hour day of negotiating supply chain contracts worth millions, expecting silence. Instead, I walked into a frat house nightmare. My open-concept living room, usually a sanctuary of cream-colored minimalism and peace, was packed with people I did not know. There were at least 15 of them. They were loud. They were drunk. And they were wearing shoes on my white Persian rug. LaToya was holding court in the center of the room, perched on the arm of my Italian leather sofa, a wine glass in one hand and a cigarette in the other. Ash was falling dangerously close to the fabric. She was laughing raucously at something a man in a pastel polo shirt was saying. I stood in the entryway, clutching my briefcase, feeling like an intruder in my own home. Terrence walked out of the kitchen holding a tray of my expensive craft beers. When he saw me, he did not smile. He did not ask how my day was. He looked annoyed, as if my arrival was an inconvenience to his social calendar. "You are home early," he said, shouting over the music. "We are having a little get-together. Brad's college buddies are in town for the golf tournament. We decided to host a pre-game mixer." I looked around the room. These were not our friends. These were Brad's friends. A room full of wealthy, loud, entitled men who looked at my furniture with critical eyes and treated my home like a hotel lobby. "Terrence," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "it is Wednesday. I have a board meeting tomorrow. And LaToya is smoking in the house." Terrence waved his hand dismissively. "Relax, Ebony. It is just a vape, or whatever. Don't be a buzzkill. Look, since you are here, we are out of ice. And the guys are getting hungry. LaToya bought some steaks, but she does not know how to work the grill." I stared at him. "You want me to grill?" "In my work clothes." Terrence rolled his eyes. "Just put on an apron. Brad is busy entertaining. I am busy bartending. You are the only one not doing anything. Be a good hostess, okay? It makes me look good." He turned his back on me and walked away before I could respond. I should have screamed. I should have kicked everyone out right then. But the old Ebony, the one who was desperate to be accepted, the one who thought love meant service, just swallowed the bile rising in her throat. I walked to the kitchen, put down my briefcase, and took off my blazer. I tied an apron over my silk blouse and walked out to the patio. The humidity hit me instantly. I spent the next hour standing over a hot grill smoke, stinging my eyes, flipping steaks and burgers for people who did not even know my name. Through the sliding glass door, I could see them inside, enjoying the air conditioning, laughing, drinking the wine I had been saving for a special occasion. LaToya came out once, not to help, but to complain. "Ebony, hurry up," she snapped, fanning herself with a napkin. "The boys are starving. And make sure Brad's steak is medium rare. Do not burn it like you did last time." She grabbed a platter of finished burgers and sashayed back inside, leaving me alone with the smoke and the grease. By the time I finished grilling, my hair was frizzy from the humidity, my expensive blouse smelled like charcoal, and my feet were throbbing. I carried the last tray of steaks inside. The music had been turned down slightly, but the noise of conversation was deafening. I set the tray on the kitchen island. Immediately the vultures descended. Hands reached over me, grabbing meat, grabbing buns, spilling sauce on the counter. Nobody said thank you. I retreated to the corner of the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of tap water, just trying to disappear until they left. That was when Brad walked in, followed by a tall man with slicked back hair and a pink sweater tied around his shoulders. This was the friend LaToya had been laughing with earlier. Let's call him Chad. Chad was holding an empty beer bottle. He looked around the kitchen, his eyes scanning right past Terrence, past LaToya, and landing on me. He did not see the CFO of a major corporation. He did not see the homeowner. He saw a black woman in an apron standing in the corner. "Hey, hon, Chad," said, snapping his fingers at me. "We are out of IPAs out there. Be a sweetheart and grab another case from the garage, will you? And bring a bottle opener." The room went quiet for a split second. I froze. I looked at Chad. I looked at Terrence, who was standing right next to him. Terrence said nothing. He just sipped his drink, looking at the floor. I looked at Brad. Brad was grinning. "I am not the caterer," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I live here. This is my house." Chad blinked, looking genuinely confused, or perhaps just indifferent. "Oh, my bad." He chuckled, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. "Here," he said, pressing the money into my hand before I could pull away. "For your trouble. Go get the beer anyway, yeah. You guys make the best barbecue." He patted my shoulder. A patronizing, heavy pat. I looked down at the $5 bill in my hand. Abraham Lincoln stared back at me. The insult was so sharp, so physical, it felt like he had slapped me across the face. He thought I was the help. In my own $750,000 home wearing a $400 blouse, I was just the help. I opened my mouth to speak. I was about to unleash a torrent of rage that would have cleared the room. But Brad stepped forward. He reached out and plucked the $5 bill from my fingers. "Whoa, Chad, you are too generous." Brad laughed, tucking the money into his own shirt pocket. "But hey, she appreciates it. Don't you, Ebony?" Brad turned to the group, a smirk playing on his lips, his eyes dead and cold as he looked at me. "You have to forgive her, guys," Brad announced, his voice carrying across the kitchen. "Ebony loves to serve. It is kind of her thing. Honestly, it is practically instinct for her people, right? They just have that natural urge to take care of the folks in charge." The room erupted in laughter. It wasn't nervous laughter. It was genuine, hearty laughter. Chad laughed. LaToya giggled, covering her mouth. And then the sound that shattered my heart into a million irreparable pieces. Terrence laughed. My husband, the man I had vowed to love and cherish, the man whose debts I had paid, whose lifestyle I funded, was chuckling along with a white man who had just implied I was genetically predisposed to be a servant. Brad winked at me. "Go get the beer, Ebony. Earn that $5." I stood there for a long moment. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The heat from the grill was still radiating off my skin, but inside my blood had turned to ice. I looked at Terrence. He refused to meet my eyes. He was too busy trying to fit in with Brad's friends, too busy being a coward to be a husband. I looked at Brad. He looked triumphant. He thought he had put me in my place. He thought he had won. Slowly, deliberately, I reached out and plucked the $5 bill back from Brad's pocket. "Hey," Brad protested. I did not say a word. I smoothed the crumpled bill against the granite countertop. I folded it neatly, once, twice, until it was a sharp, small square. I looked at Brad. I looked at Chad. I looked at Terrence. I finally understood. Mama Estella had been right. You cannot love people into respecting you. You cannot buy dignity. And you cannot build a home with termites. "I am going to get the beer," I said softly. A cheer went up from the group. They thought I had submitted. They thought I had accepted my place. I turned around and walked toward the garage. But as I walked away, my hand closed around that $5 bill so tight my nails dug into my palm. I was not going to get the beer, I was going to get my freedom. That $5 bill was not a tip. It was the price of their destruction. And as I stepped into the cool darkness of the garage, the tears that had been threatening to fall evaporated. Sadness was a luxury I could no longer afford. Hatred, however, was free. And I had a lot of it to spend. Sunday mornings were supposed to be my sanctuary. It was the one time of the week when I allowed myself to forget that I was carrying the financial weight of 3 households on my back. I would sit in my sunroom, drink my imported tea, and prepare mentally for the high-stakes week ahead at the logistics firm, where I managed a $300 million portfolio. But that Sunday my peace was shattered, not by a phone call, but by the sound of a moving truck backing into my driveway. I put down my teacup, the china clinking nervously against the saucer. I walked to the window. Down below, a rusted U-Haul truck was idling, spewing black smoke into the pristine air of our cul-de-sac. And standing next to it, directing 2 sweaty teenagers, who looked like they had been hired off Craigslist, were LaToya and Brad. They were not just visiting. There were boxes, dozens of them. Duct-taped cardboard boxes, black garbage bags that looked like they were bursting at the seams with clothes, and a dirty mattress that was currently being dragged across my manicured lawn. I felt a cold pit form in my stomach. I turned around to find Terrence standing in the doorway of the sunroom. He was fully dressed, which was unusual for a Sunday morning. He looked guilty. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for his mother to find the shards. "Terrence," I said, pointing out the window. "Why is your sister moving a mattress into our house?" Terrence rubbed the back of his neck, refusing to meet my eyes. "Babe, look, do not get mad. It is an emergency. Their landlord is a total jerk. He evicted them this morning, just out of nowhere. No notice, nothing. It is totally illegal, but they have nowhere else to go." I stared at him. "Eviction processes take months, Terrence. You do not get kicked out on a Sunday morning with 0 notice unless you haven't paid rent in half a year. Did you know about this?" Terrence sighed, finally looking at me with that pleading puppy dog expression he used to manipulate me. "Okay, fine. They called me a few days ago. They are a little behind on rent. Just a little. Brad is waiting on some funding for his startup, and LaToya spent a bit too much on her image consulting business. They just need a place to crash for a few days. A week tops. Until they find a new luxury condo that suits their style." A week. I knew what a week meant in Terrence's language. It meant forever. Before I could argue, the front door slammed open. I heard LaToya's voice echoing through the foyer. "Hello? Anyone home? We need help with the big screen TV. I am not lifting that, I just got my nails done." I marched downstairs. The hallway was already filled with their debris. A bag had ripped open, spilling LaToya's cheap, glittery shoes all over my hardwood floor. LaToya was standing in the kitchen opening my refrigerator. She took out a jug of orange juice and drank straight from the carton. "Hey, Rumi," she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "God, this place is far from the city. I do not know how you live out here in the sticks. But the guest room is okay. We put the mattress in there. Brad says the feng shui is off, but we will fix it." I looked at Brad, who was currently dragging a massive gaming chair through my front door, scratching the doorframe as he went. "Watch the paint," I snapped. Brad stopped and looked at me, sweating and annoyed. "Relax, Ebony. It is just paint. You can afford to touch it up. You know you should be grateful. Having family in the house brings energy. This place feels like a mausoleum. It is too quiet. We are going to bring some life into this joint." I turned to Terrence. "No, absolutely not. We discussed this. No long-term guests. I work from home 3 days a week. I need quiet. I need space." Terrence put his hands on my shoulders, squeezing a little too hard. "Ebony, stop being selfish. This is family. Where are they supposed to go?" A shelter. You want my sister in a shelter while you sleep in a 5-bedroom house? What is wrong with you? Brad is going through a hard time. Be a supportive sister-in-law for once. I looked at the three of them. The wall of entitlement was impenetrable. If I kicked them out now, I would be the villain. I would be the heartless corporate witch who let her family sleep on the street. Fine, I hissed. 1 week, 7 days. If you are not out by next Sunday, I am calling the sheriff. Latoya laughed, tapping me on the cheek with a long acrylic nail. You are so funny when you try to be tough. Thanks for the juice. I retreated to my bedroom, locking the door. I told myself I could survive a week. I told myself I just had to focus on my work. I had a major merger happening on Tuesday. I needed to prepare the financial risk assessment reports. My home office was my fortress. As long as I had my office, I would be okay. I was wrong. Monday morning arrived. I woke up at 6 dressed in my favorite silk blouse and tailored trousers, ready to conquer the day. I grabbed my coffee and walked down the hall to my home office. This room was my pride and joy. I had spent $10,000 of my own money soundproofing it. I had a dual monitor setup with 4K resolution, a high-speed fiber optic connection hardwired into the wall, and a mahogany desk that made me feel powerful. I reached for the door handle. It was locked. I frowned. I never locked my office. I rattled the handle. Brad, I heard from inside. A muffled groan. I knocked loudly. Brad, open this door. There was a shuffling sound, and then the door cracked open. Brad stood there wearing nothing but a pair of boxer briefs and a t-shirt that smelled like old sweat. His eyes were red and bleary. What is it? He grumbled. It is 6 in the morning, Ebony. Keep it down. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. My jaw dropped. My sanctuary was destroyed. My mahogany desk was covered in empty soda cans and bags of spicy chips. My expensive ergonomic chair had been pushed into the corner, replaced by the ugly gaming chair Brad had dragged in yesterday. But the worst part was my equipment. My dual monitors, the ones I needed to analyze complex spreadsheets, were pushed to the very edge of the desk, dangerously close to falling off. In the center of my desk sat Brad's massive gaming console and a curved monitor he had brought with him. And wires. There were wires everywhere. He had unplugged my docking station. He had unplugged my printer. Brad? I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of shock and fury. What are you doing in my office? Brad scratched his stomach, yawning. The Wi-Fi in the guest room sucks. It was lagging. I could not play Call of Duty with that ping. I needed a hardwired connection. This is the only room with an Ethernet port, so I set up shop here. He walked back to his chair and sat down, putting his headset on. Get out, I said. Get out right now. I have to work. I have a meeting in 2 hours. Brad pulled one side of his headset away from his ear. Chill out. You can work at the kitchen table. You just type emails all day, right? You do not need all this gear for sending emails. I am in the middle of a ranked match. I cannot quit now or my stats will tank. He turned back to his screen. I walked over to the wall and ripped the Ethernet cable out of the socket. Brad screamed. No, you crazy witch. I just lost connection. Do you know what you just did? I pointed to the door. Out. Now. Brad stood up, towering over me. He was a big man, and in that moment, he used his size to intimidate me. You know Terrence is right about you, he sneered. You are a control freak. You think just because you make a little money you own the world? This is my house too now. I live here. I have rights. I need this room for my mental health. Gaming is how I decompress. You are stressing me out. Terrence ran into the room, hearing the shouting. What is happening? He yelled. Terrence, look at my office, I shouted. He unplugged my work computer. He is eating chips on my quarterly reports. Terrence looked at the mess, then looked at Brad, who was putting on a fake sad face. She pulled the plug on me, man, Brad said. I was just trying to relax. She knows I have anxiety. Terrence sighed and turned to me. Ebony, seriously. Let him have the room. He is going through a lot with the eviction. He needs a safe space. I stared at him. I need to work, Terrence. This is how I pay the mortgage. This is how I pay for the electricity he is using to play his stupid games. Just go to a coffee shop, Terrence said, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. You like coffee shops? You're always talking about how you like the ambiance. Just go to Starbucks. Let Brad have the room for a few days. Don't be so rigid. I looked at my husband. I looked at the intruder in his underwear sitting in my chair. I realized then that arguing was pointless. They did not respect my work because they did not respect me. To them, my career was just a hobby that conveniently paid their bills. Fine, I said. My voice was deadly calm. I walked over to the desk. I did not try to plug my monitors back in. I simply unplugged my laptop, grabbed my charger, and swept my papers into my bag. Where are you going? Terrence asked, sensing the shift in my mood. To a coffee shop, I said. Like you asked. I walked out of my house past LaToya, who was sleeping on my living room sofa with the TV blaring. I got into my car, which still smelled faintly of smoke despite my scrubbing. I drove to a crowded, noisy coffee shop 3 miles away. I found a tiny, wobbly table in the corner next to the bathroom. I opened my laptop. I connected to the slow public Wi-Fi. And there, amidst the sound of grinding espresso beans and crying babies, I logged into the secure server of my company. I finalized a deal that would net my firm $12 million. I approved a budget that was 10 times larger than the value of my house. I was a powerhouse. I was a leader. I was a queen in the corporate world. But in my own home, I was a refugee. As I typed, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a security alert from my home network. New device connected. Brad's PC. Priority level high. Terrence had given him the admin password. They had prioritized his gaming console over my security system. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee. I did not cry. I did not call them to scream. I simply opened a new tab on my browser. I went to a real estate website. I searched for apartment rentals. Not for them, for me. But then I remembered Mama Estella's words. Don't leave. Let them dig their own graves. I closed the tab. I went back to work. Let Brad play his games. He did not know that the game I was about to start had no reset button. And when I won, there would be no survivors. By Tuesday evening, my house had ceased to be a home and had transformed into a hostile territory where I was the enemy combatant. After the invasion of my office, I tried to tell myself that I could survive by retreating to the basics. I just needed to eat healthy, sleep in my own bed, and maintain my hygiene. I thought those were simple, non-negotiable human rights. I was wrong. I came home at 7:30, my stomach growling. I had been in back-to-back meetings all day, surviving on black coffee and adrenaline. The only thing keeping me going was the thought of the meal prep I had done on Sunday before the chaos arrived. I had grilled 4 portions of wild-caught Alaskan salmon and roasted asparagus packed neatly in glass containers. It was part of a strict anti-inflammatory diet I was following to manage the stress that Terrence and his family were piling onto my nervous system. I walked into the kitchen, dropping my keys in the bowl. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It was not the clean scent of lemon and herbs. It was the smell of grease and burnt cheese. LaToya was sitting at the kitchen island. She was wearing my silk robe, the one I bought in Paris, and she was digging a fork into a glass container. My glass container. She looked up as I entered, her mouth full. Oh, hey. You are finally back. We were wondering when you would show up to do the dishes. I stared at the container in her hand. It was my last piece of salmon. The other 3 empty containers were stacked in the sink, unwashed, filled with water and floating bits of food. LaToya, I said, my voice tight. Is that my dinner? She swallowed and licked her lips. This? Yeah. Honestly, it was kind of dry. I had to drown it in ranch dressing to make it edible. You really need to learn how to season your food, Ebony. It tastes like cardboard. I felt a vein throb in my temple. That is $20 a pound salmon, Latoya. That is my lunch and dinner for the week. I cooked that for myself because I have dietary restrictions. You ate all of it. 4 days worth of food. Latoya rolled her eyes, scraping the last bite of fish against the glass. God, you are so dramatic. It is just fish. We were hungry. Brad needed protein after his gaming session. And I am breastfeeding, remember. I need calories. You are skinny enough. You can afford to skip a meal? Or just order a pizza like a normal person. It is not about the calories, I snapped, walking over and snatching the empty container from her hand. It is about respect. You do not walk into someone's house and eat their prepared meals without asking. I worked for that food. Latoya laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. You act like you own everything. You are so stingy, Ebony. Seriously, it is ugly. Family shares food. If I had a piece of fish, I would give it to you. I would not count pennies like you do. This is why you do not have any real friends. You are too transactional. She stood up, tightening the belt of my robe around her waist. And by the way, she added, yawning. We are out of milk. You should pick some up. Brad likes the organic kind. I watched her walk out of the kitchen, leaving her dirty fork on the counter. My hands were shaking. I was hungry, I was tired, and I was being gaslit in my own kitchen. I opened the fridge. It was decimated. They had eaten the eggs, the yogurt, the berries. The only thing left was a jar of pickles and a half-empty bottle of hot sauce. I slammed the fridge door shut. I did not scream. I could not scream. If I started screaming, I knew I would never stop. I grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl, the only thing they had deemed unworthy of consuming, and walked upstairs. I just wanted to take a shower. I wanted to wash the day off my skin and pretend that I was alone in a hotel room. I reached the top of the stairs and saw a trail of wet footprints leading into the master bathroom. My bathroom. The guest bathroom was fully functional, stocked with fresh towels and toiletries, but apparently that was not good enough. I pushed the door open and stopped dead. The room was filled with steam. The air smelled thick with the scent of my La Mer moisturizer, my $600 moisturizer. Latoya's 5-year-old daughter was sitting on the marble floor. She was giggling, surrounded by a pile of my cosmetics. She had opened my lipstick tubes and drawn red and pink lines all over the white tiles. She had taken my eyeshadow palette, the limited edition one, and crushed the powders into a fine dust, smearing it onto her cheeks like war paint. But the centerpiece of the destruction was the jar of cream. She had scooped it out with her little hands and was rubbing it onto the belly of her plastic doll. Latoya was sitting on the edge of the tub, scrolling on her phone, completely ignoring her child. Latoya, I whispered. She looked up. What? Oh, do not worry, I will wipe it up. She was just bored. I walked over to the child and gently took the jar from her hands. It was empty. $600 of marine extract and miracle broth gone in minutes. This is not finger paint, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of grief and rage. This is La Mer. This jar costs more than your car payment, Latoya. Latoya scoffed, hopping off the tub. Oh, please. It is just lotion. You get ripped off buying that overpriced junk anyway. It is all the same ingredients as Nivea. Besides, look how happy she is. You care more about your stupid face cream than your own niece's happiness. That is sick, Ebony. You need to check your priorities. She picked up her daughter, stepping over the crushed eyeshadow. Come on, baby, she cooed to the child. Auntie Ebony is being mean about her toys. Let's go watch cartoons. They left me standing in the wreckage of my bathroom. I looked at the lipstick on the grout. I looked at the empty jar in my hand. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. They were not just taking my space. They were eroding my identity. They were taking the small luxuries I worked hard for and turning them into garbage just to prove that they could. I spent the next hour on my hands and knees scrubbing lipstick off the floor, salvaging what I could of my makeup. I took a shower, but the water felt cold. I felt dirty not on my skin, but in my soul. I dried off and put on my pajamas. I was exhausted down to my bones. I walked to the sink to brush my teeth. I just wanted to sleep. I just wanted to close my eyes and fast forward to a time when they were gone. I reached for my toothbrush. It was an electric one with a specialized head that I changed every 2 weeks. I picked it up and frowned. The bristles, which had been white this morning, were now stained a dark, murky brown. There was a sticky gel-like residue caught between the tufts. I brought it closer to my nose. It smelled like heavy-duty hair gel and edge control. I felt my stomach turn over. I gripped the sink, feeling bile rise in my throat. I walked out into the hallway holding the toothbrush like a piece of evidence. Latoya was in the guest room painting her nails. "Latoya," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Did you use my toothbrush?" She looked up, blowing on her wet nails. "Huh. Oh yeah. Sorry. I could not find my edge brush. You know, the little one for the baby hairs. I needed to lay my edges down for the photos we took earlier. I grabbed the first thing I saw." She shrugged as if she had borrowed a cup of sugar. "Do not look so horrified," she added, seeing my face. I rinsed it off. "It is just hair gel. It is not poison." "God, you are such a germaphobe." "It is just family germs." I stared at her. I looked at this woman who felt entitled to my food, my home, my money, and now the most intimate tool of my hygiene. She had used the thing I put in my mouth to brush her hair gel. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was a quiet, final click, like a lock engaging on a vault door. I did not yell. I did not throw the toothbrush at her. I simply turned around and walked back to the bathroom. I dropped the toothbrush into the trash can. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were dark, but they were dry. "Okay," I said to my reflection. "Okay. If they wanted to treat me like an object, I would show them what happens when an object malfunctions. If they thought they could consume me piece by piece without consequence, they were about to get severe food poisoning." I went to my bedroom and pulled out my phone. I did not check my work emails. I opened the app for the security cameras I had installed that morning. I checked the angle of the camera under the dining table. I checked the microphone sensitivity in the office. Everything was recording. I lay down in bed listening to the sound of Brad's video game exploding in the next room. I closed my eyes. "Eat my food, Latoya," I thought. "Use my cream. Brush your edges with my dignity. Because tomorrow I am going to feed you something you will never be able to digest. Tomorrow the bank closes, and the slaughter begins." The vibration of my phone against the center console of my car was violent enough to startle me. I was sitting at a red light 3 blocks from the house that was rapidly becoming my prison. I glanced down at the screen expecting an email from my boss or a reminder about a bill. Instead, I saw a fraud alert from American Express. Transaction approved. $5,240. Gucci at Phipps Plaza. My breath hitched in my throat. That card was my emergency card. It was tucked away in the back of my wallet, reserved for hospital bills, urgent car repairs, or dire situations. I had not touched it in 2 years. I frantically patted my purse. The wallet was there, but when I unzipped the side pocket, the slot where the platinum card usually sat was empty. The light turned green, but I could not move. Someone behind me honked a long, aggressive blare that snapped me back to reality. I slammed my foot on the gas, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew exactly who had the card, and I knew exactly what constituted an emergency in their twisted world. I pulled into my driveway, tires screeching slightly on the asphalt. I did not bother to park straight. I threw the car into park and stormed toward the front door. Through the living room window, I could see movement. I could see them. I burst through the door. The scene that greeted me was enough to make my blood boil. Latoya was standing in the middle of the living room, posing in front of the full-length mirror she had dragged out of the hallway. She was holding a handbag. It was a structured emerald green leather tote with the interlocking G logo in gold hardware. It was beautiful. It was expensive, and it was bought with the money I had set aside for my children's college fund. Terrence was sitting on the sofa scrolling on his phone looking bored. Brad was drinking a beer watching LaToya with a smirk. LaToya saw me in the reflection of the mirror. She did not look guilty. She did not try to hide the bag. She spun around, beaming. "Oh, Ebony, look who is home. What do you think? It matches my eyes right. I have been eyeing this bag for months. It is the limited edition run. They only had 2 left in the city." I walked over to her, my hands shaking so hard I had to clench them into fists. "Give me the card, LaToya. Give it to me right now." LaToya pouted, clutching the bag closer to her chest like a shield. "God, hello to you too. You are always so aggressive. Can't you just say it looks nice? I am trying to elevate my brand." "This bag is an investment piece." I held out my hand. "You stole my credit card from my wallet. That is grand larceny. That is a felony. Give me the card and the receipt. You are taking it back." LaToya laughed a high-pitched, incredulous sound. "Stole. That is a harsh word, Ebony. I did not steal anything. I borrowed it. Besides, Terrence said it was okay." My head snapped toward my husband. He finally looked up from his phone, his expression mild as if we were discussing what to have for dinner rather than a $5,000 theft. "Terrence," I whispered. "You told her she could take my emergency card." Terrence shrugged, leaning back into the cushions. "It is not just your card, Ebony. We are married. What is yours is mine." And LaToya was having a meltdown. She has been through so much with the eviction. She needed a pick-me-up. Retail therapy is a real thing. She was feeling depressed, and as her brother, I wanted to cheer her up. "You make plenty of money. Why are you hoarding it while your family suffers?" "Suffers!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "She is holding a Gucci bag, Terrence. That is not suffering. That is $5,000. That is 3 mortgage payments. That is Malik's tuition for a semester." Terrence stood up, his face hardening. "Lower your voice. You are scaring the kids upstairs." "Look, I authorized the purchase. I am an authorized user on that account, remember? You added me 3 years ago, so technically I gave her permission. It is family money. You need to learn to share. You are so obsessed with ownership. It is ugly, Ebony. It makes you look bitter." I looked at him, and for the first time I did not see a partner. I saw a thief. A thief who slept in my bed and knew my passwords. I pulled out my phone. "I am calling the police. I am reporting the card stolen." Brad laughed from the armchair. "Go ahead, Karen. Call the cops on your own husband. See how that works out for you." I ignored him. I dialed 911. My hands were trembling as I pressed the phone to my ear. "Emergency services. What is your emergency?" "My sister-in-law stole my credit card." I said, my voice shaking. "She just charged $5,000 without my permission. She is in my house right now." I gave the dispatcher my address. I waited. I stood there in the living room guarding the door, refusing to let LaToya leave with the bag. 10 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers walked to the door. I felt a surge of relief. Finally, someone with authority would put an end to this madness. I opened the door. "Officer, thank you for coming. She is right there." She took my card. The officer, a tired-looking older man, stepped inside. He looked at LaToya, who was now crying fake tears on the sofa. He looked at Terrence. "Ma'am, who is the cardholder?" the officer asked. "I am," I said. "And who is this man?" he asked, pointing to Terrence. "That is my husband," I replied. Terrence stepped forward, putting on his best charming, innocent voice. "Officer, I am an authorized user on the account. My name is on the file. I gave my sister permission to buy a gift. My wife is just having a manic episode. She is very stressed at work and she is overreacting. We are trying to calm her down." The officer looked at me. "Ma'am, is he an authorized user?" I hesitated. "Yes." But I did not give him permission to buy a luxury bag for his sister. This is theft. The officer sighed and closed his notepad. Ma'am, if he is on the account, he has the right to use the card. And if he gave the card to his sister, that is not theft. That is a domestic dispute. It is a civil matter. We cannot arrest someone for using a card they were authorized to use. But she took it from my wallet, I argued, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. Did you see her take it? The officer asked. No, but... And your husband says he gave it to her. The officer interrupted. Look, folks, you need to work this out amongst yourselves or call a divorce lawyer, but this is not a crime scene. Have a good night. He turned around and walked out. I stood there, the open door letting in the humid night air. I watched the police car drive away. I watched the only lifeline I thought I had disappear down the street. I turned back to the room. LaToya had stopped crying instantly. She was wiping her dry eyes, smirking at me. See? She said, picking up the green bag and slinging it over her shoulder. I told you, you are just being dramatic. Brad raised his beer bottle in a mock toast. Better luck next time, Ebony. Maybe you should read the fine print on your marriage license. Community property, baby. Terrence walked over to me. He did not apologize. He did not comfort me. He leaned in close, his voice low and threatening. Do not ever call the cops on my family again, Ebony. You embarrassed us. You are lucky I do not cancel that card right now and leave you with nothing. Now go upstairs and cool off. We are ordering pizza, and since you are in a spending mood, we are using your card for that too. He patted my cheek. A soft, patronizing pat. I stood frozen in the hallway. The realization washed over me like ice water. The law would not protect me. My husband would not protect me. In the eyes of the world, I was just a bitter wife who didn't want to share. They thought they had won. They thought they had trapped me. I looked at the green bag swinging on LaToya's shoulder. I looked at the smug satisfaction on Terrence's face. I turned and walked toward the stairs. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was sharpening. The police said it was a civil matter. They said it was about authorization. Fine. If the law said Terrence had the power to destroy me because his name was on the paper, then I needed to change the papers. I walked into my bedroom and locked the door. I did not cry this time. I sat down at my vanity and looked at myself in the mirror. They wanted a war over assets. They wanted to play games with ownership. I picked up my phone. I did not call the bank to cancel the card. That would be too small, too petty. Instead, I opened the app for the trust fund that owned the house. The trust that Mama Estella had set up years ago, listing me as the beneficiary, but listing a very specific clause about occupants. I scrolled through the document until I found Article 14, Section B, the clause about unauthorized tenants and breach of contract. I smiled. It was a cold, humorless smile. Enjoy the bag, LaToya, I whispered to the empty room. Because it is the last thing you will ever own. And Terrence, you like being an authorized user. Let's see how you like being unauthorized to enter the premises. The police were right. It was a civil matter, and I was about to become the most uncivil plaintiff they had ever met. The red numbers on my bedside alarm clock read 2:14 in the morning. Outside, the storm that had been threatening Atlanta all evening had finally broken. Thunder shook the window panes in their frames, rattling the glass like angry spirits trying to get in. But it was not the thunder that woke me. It was a sound much smaller, much more terrifying coming from down the hall. It was a wheeze, a high-pitched, desperate whistling sound, followed by a wet, struggling cough. I sat up instantly, my heart hammering against my ribs. Maternal instinct is faster than thought. I knew that sound. It was the sound of air not getting into lungs. It was the sound of my 7-year-old daughter Aisha suffocating. I threw off the covers and sprinted barefoot down the hallway. The hardwood floor was cold under my feet. When I burst into Aisha's room, the sight froze the blood in my veins. She was sitting up in bed, clutching her chest. Her eyes were wide with panic. Her mouth was open, gasping like a fish out of water, but no air was moving. Her skin, usually a warm brown, looked gray in the dim light of her nightlight. Her lips were taking on a terrifying blue tint. "Aisha," I gasped, rushing to her side. "Breathe, baby. Breathe with mommy." I grabbed the emergency inhaler from her nightstand. I shook it violently, my hands trembling. I pressed it to her lips. One puff. Wait. She tried to inhale, but her throat was too tight. The medicine wasn't getting down. She choked her little body, arching off the mattress as she fought for oxygen. It was not working. This was not a normal attack. This was a full-blown respiratory crisis. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I pressed the phone to my ear with my shoulder while I rubbed Aisha's back, trying to keep her calm. "All circuits are busy," a recorded voice said. "Please stay on the line." Busy. The storm must have caused accidents all over the city. I looked at my daughter. She was scratching at her throat, tears streaming down her face. I could not wait for a dispatcher. I could not wait for an ambulance that might take 20 minutes to navigate the flooded streets. I had to drive her. We were 10 minutes from Emory University Hospital. I could get her there faster than anyone. I scooped Aisha up in my arms. She was heavy, dead weight with exhaustion and lack of oxygen. "Stay with me, Aisha," I whispered, running back into the master bedroom. "Terrence. Terrence, wake up!" I screamed his name. Terrence was sprawled face down on the bed, snoring loudly. The room smelled like a distillery. He and Brad had finished a bottle of expensive bourbon after the police left earlier that evening. I kicked the bed. I grabbed his shoulder and shook him so hard his head flopped against the pillow. "Terrence, Aisha cannot breathe." "We have to go to the hospital. Get up!" He groaned, swatting my hand away without opening his eyes. "Ugh, stop it, Ebony," he mumbled, his words slurred and thick. "She is fine. Give her some water. Let me sleep." He turned over, pulling the duvet over his head. I stared at him for a split second. My husband, the father of my child, he was choosing sleep over his daughter's life. I did not waste another second. I grabbed my purse and the keys from the nightstand. I ran down the stairs carrying Aisha, whose breathing was becoming a shallow, rapid rattle. I kicked open the door to the garage. I hit the button for the automatic door opener. The heavy metal door rolled up, revealing the stormy night and an empty concrete floor. I stopped. My brain could not process what my eyes were seeing. The garage was empty. There was just a lonely oil stain on the floor where my Range Rover autobiography should have been. Then I remembered. Brad. Brad had taken the car at 10 o'clock. He said he needed to blow off steam after the police visit. He said he was going to a lounge in Buckhead to meet some investors. Terrence had let him take it. My knees almost gave out. My car. The safest SUV on the market. The vehicle I bought specifically because it had four-wheel drive and safety features to protect my children. It was gone. It was probably parked in front of a club right now, while Brad sipped cocktails and laughed about how he ran my house. I looked down at Aisha. Her eyes were starting to roll back in her head. She was going limp. Panic, cold and sharp, sliced through me. I did not have a car. We lived in a gated subdivision miles from the main road. Uber would take 15 minutes to arrive in this weather. I had no choice. I tightened my grip on my daughter. I turned and ran out the front door straight into the deluge. The rain hit us like a physical blow. It was freezing cold, a sharp contrast to the humid heat of the day. The wind whipped my hair into my face, blinding me. I ran. I ran down the long, winding driveway of my expensive home. I ran past the manicured lawns and the silent houses of my neighbors. "Help," I screamed, but the wind tore the word from my lips. Thunder cracked directly overhead, drowning out my voice. I reached the main road outside our subdivision. It was pitch black, lit only by the occasional flash of lightning. My lungs were burning. My arms were screaming in protest. Aisha was getting heavier with every step. I looked at her face in the flash of lightning. She looked lifeless. "Please, God," I begged, sobbing into the rain. "Please do not take her. Take everything else. Take the house, take the money, just do not take her. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the sheets of rain. I ran into the middle of the road. I waved my arms frantically. I did not care if I got hit. I just needed them to stop. The car screeched to a halt, tires hydroplaning slightly on the wet asphalt. It was an old beat-up yellow taxi, probably on its way back to the city depot. The driver rolled down the window. He was an older man with kind eyes. "Lady, are you crazy?" he yelled. "You are going to get killed." "My baby!" I screamed, holding Aisha up to the window. "She cannot breathe. Hospital, please!" The look on his face changed instantly. He unlocked the back door. "Get in!" he shouted. I dove into the back seat, dripping wet, clutching my semi-conscious child. The interior smelled of stale coffee and pine air freshener, but to me, it smelled like salvation. "Emery," I gasped. "Go!" The driver did not ask questions. He floored it. He drove like a man possessed, running red lights weaving through the empty, rain-slicked streets. I held Aisha against my chest. I could feel her heart fluttering like a trapped bird. It was too fast. Then it was too slow. "Stay with me, baby," I chanted, rocking her back and forth. "Mommy is here. We are almost there." I thought about the Range Rover. I thought about the heated leather seats. I thought about how fast and smooth it would have been. I thought about Brad sitting in that car right now, probably bragging to a woman about the luxury vehicle he owned. I hated him. I hated him with a purity that frightened me. I hated Terrence for sleeping. I hated LaToya for existing. We screeched into the emergency bay of the hospital. I did not wait for the car to stop completely. I threw the door open and sprinted inside, screaming for help. Nurses swarmed us. They took Aisha from my arms. They put a mask on her face. They wheeled her behind double doors. I tried to follow, but a security guard held me back. "Ma'am, let them work," he said gently. "You need to sign in." I collapsed into a plastic chair in the waiting room. I was soaked to the bone. My pajamas were clinging to my skin. I was shivering uncontrollably, a puddle of rainwater forming around my feet. I sat there for an hour. 60 minutes of hell. I watched the clock on the wall, every second ticking away like a countdown to my own destruction. Finally, the double doors opened. A doctor walked out. He looked tired. He walked straight to me. "Mrs. Vance?" he asked. I stood up. My legs were numb. "Is she... She is stable," the doctor said. His voice was calm, professional. "We got her airways open. She is on a nebulizer now. Her oxygen levels are coming back up." I let out a sob, my knees buckling. The security guard caught my arm to steady me. But the doctor continued, his expression hardening. "You need to know something. This was a near-fatal event. Her airways were 90% closed when she arrived." He took off his glasses and looked me dead in the eye. "If you had arrived 10 minutes later, Mrs. Vance, we would be having a very different conversation." 10 minutes. That is the margin you had. 10 minutes. I looked at the doctor. I nodded slowly. "Thank you," I whispered. He walked away. I sat back down. 10 minutes. If I had waited for an Uber. 10 minutes. If I had tried to wake Terrence one more time. 10 minutes. Brad had the car. My car. The car that could have saved those 10 minutes without me having to stand in the middle of a highway begging strangers for help. My phone buzzed in my wet pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Terrence. "Where are you? I woke up and you are gone. Did you take the kid for a drive? Bring back some Gatorade. My head is killing me." I stared at the screen. Something inside me died in that moment. The part of me that wanted to be a good wife. The part of me that wanted to keep the peace. The part of me that believed in forgiveness. It all died on that plastic hospital chair. I did not reply. I put the phone away. I was done being a victim. I was done being the bigger person. I looked at the rain hitting the hospital window. Brad had my car. Terrence had my patience. But Mama Estella had the deed to the house, and I had the rage of a mother who almost watched her child die because her husband wanted a nap and his brother-in-law wanted to look rich. I closed my eyes. Sleep well, Terence, I thought. Because when I get home, I am going to burn your world to the ground, and I am going to warm my hands over the ashes. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the private hospital room. My daughter Aisha was finally asleep, her small chest rising and falling with a steady chemically assisted rhythm. I sat in the uncomfortable vinyl chair next to her bed, watching the rain streak against the dark window. I felt hollowed out. The rage that had carried me through the emergency room doors had settled into a cold, heavy stone in my stomach. I was technically homeless in my own mind. I could not go back to that house. I could not look at Terence without wanting to inflict physical pain on him. I was calculating how much money I had in my secret savings account, wondering if it was enough for a divorce lawyer and a deposit on a new apartment. The door to the room opened softly. I expected a nurse coming to check Aisha's vitals. I did not turn around. "Mrs. Vance," I said, my voice raspy. "She is sleeping." "There is no Mrs. Vance here," a voice said. "Only the CEO." I spun around. Standing in the doorway was my mother. But it was not the Mama Estella I had seen on the subway platform 12 hours ago. The worn-out wool coat was gone. The scuffed orthopedic shoes were gone. Standing before me was a woman who radiated power. She was wearing a tailored midnight blue St. John knit suit that cost more than Terence's entire wardrobe. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, no longer hidden under a knit cap. On her wrist sat a Patek Philippe watch, and in her hand she held a leather document folder embossed with gold letters. "Mama," I whispered, standing up. She did not rush to hug me. She walked over to the bed, looked down at Aisha, and gently brushed a stray curl off my daughter's forehead. Her face softened for a fraction of a second, then hardened again as she turned to me. "Sit down, Ebony," she commanded. I sat. I had never disobeyed that tone. She pulled a chair close to mine, sitting with a posture so regal she made the hospital chair look like a throne. She placed the leather folder on the bedside table. "You are planning to leave him," she stated. It was not a question. I nodded, wiping a fresh tear from my cheek. "I cannot do it anymore, Mama. He almost killed her. He chose sleep over her life. And Brad stole my car. I am going to file for divorce in the morning. I am going to sue them for everything." Mama Estella shook her head slowly. "No, you are not." I stared at her. "What do you mean, no?" "Mama, they are monsters. If you file for divorce tomorrow," she said, her voice low and clinical, "it becomes a domestic dispute. Georgia is an equitable distribution state. Terence will argue that he contributed to the household. He will argue that the house increased in value during the marriage. He will ask for alimony. He will ask for half the assets. Even if you win, you will spend 2 years in court and $50,000 in legal fees. And Brad will walk away scot-free because Terence gave him the keys." She tapped the leather folder. "We do not want half Ebony. We want total annihilation." She opened the folder. Inside were documents I had never seen before. Deeds, titles, incorporation papers. "Look at the deed to your house," she said. I looked. I saw the address. But under owner it did not say Ebony Vance. It said the Estella Family Revocable Trust. "And look at the registration for the Range Rover," she continued. I looked. Registered owner Vance Logistics International, LLC. "You never owned that house," Ebony Mama said, a small, terrifying smile playing on her lips. "And you never owned that car." I did. "I set up the trust 5 years ago when you married that man. I knew this day would come. I knew he would try to bleed you dry, so I made sure you had nothing to give him." I stared at the papers, my mind racing. "So, it is yours." "It is yours in spirit," she corrected. "But legally it belongs to my corporation, and that changes everything." She leaned in closer, her dark eyes locking onto mine. When a husband takes a car that belongs to his wife, it is a marital dispute. When a man takes a car that belongs to a corporation without a rental agreement or insurance authorization, it is grand theft auto. It is a felony. She pointed to another document. When a wife gives her husband money, it is a gift. But that credit card Latoya stole. That card is linked to your corporate expense account. Unauthorized use of a corporate card across state lines or over a certain limit is federal wire fraud. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The air in the room seemed to crackle with electricity. Mama leaned back, crossing her legs. "Here is the plan," she said. "You are going to go back to that house. You are going to apologize." "Apologize," I choked out. "Yes. You are going to tell Terrence you were emotional. You are going to tell Brad you are sorry for overreacting about the office. You are going to cook them dinner. You are going to be the perfect submissive wife." Why, I asked, my voice trembling. Because she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "We need them to feel safe. We need them to get arrogant. I need Brad to drive that car across state lines. I need Terrence to sign his name on a document that does not belong to him. I need them to commit a crime so undeniable that no divorce lawyer in the world can save them." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, high-definition camera disguised as a phone charger. "Plant this in the office," she said. "Catch them in the act." I looked at the device. I looked at my mother. I realized then that I had been playing checkers while she had been playing three-dimensional chess. "You want me to set them up?" I said. "I want you to give them enough rope to hang themselves," she replied. She stood up, smoothing her suit. "Go home, Ebony. Shower. Put on a smile. Let them think they broke you. Because when the U.S. Marshals kick down that door on Saturday night, I want the look of surprise on their faces to be genuine." She walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Ebony." "Yes, Mama. Stop crying. Tears are for people who do not have a plan. You have a plan. And you have the checkbook." She walked out, leaving me alone in the silence. But the silence was no longer empty. It was filled with the cold, hard promise of justice. I picked up the camera. I looked at the deed. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I washed my face. I looked at my reflection. The tired, scared mother was gone. I was an operative now. I was a soldier in Mama Estella's army. I packed my bag. I kissed Aisha's forehead. "I am going home, Terrence," I whispered to the air. "And I am bringing hell with me." I walked back into the house at 7 in the morning. The storm had passed, leaving the sky a bruised purple, but the air inside my home was stale with the smell of stale bourbon and neglect. My daughter Aisha was safe at my mother's penthouse, recovering with a private nurse. I was alone. And for the first time in my marriage, I was not walking on eggshells. I was walking on a minefield that I had planted myself. The house was silent. Terrence, Brad, and Latoya were still passed out, likely sleeping off the celebration of their victory over me the night before. I walked into the kitchen. My first instinct was to scream, to smash the dirty glasses left on the counter, to drag them out of bed by their hair. But Mama Estella's voice was ringing in my ears. "Give them rope." I put down my purse. I took off my coat. I rolled up the sleeves of my blouse. I opened the refrigerator, which was now barren thanks to their gluttony, but I found enough bacon, eggs, and grits to make a meal. I began to cook. I cooked with a vengeance. I fried the bacon until the scent wafted up the stairs, thick and savory. I scrambled eggs with heavy cream. I made cheese grits, the kind Terrence loved, the kind that made him sluggish and happy. As the grease popped in the pan, I reached into my bag. I pulled out the first device Mama had given me. It was a listening bug, no bigger than a quarter, with an adhesive back. I slid my hand under the heavy oak dining table. I felt the rough wood of the underside. I pressed the device firmly against the center of the table, right where they usually sat to gossip and plot. I checked my phone. The app showed a green dot. Audio clear. I moved to the living room. I placed the second device, a tiny high-definition camera disguised as a USB charging block, into the wall outlet facing the sofa. It looked completely innocent, just a piece of white plastic. But the lens was wide angle, capturing the entire room in 4K resolution. By the time I heard footsteps upstairs, the trap was set. Terrence was the first to come down. He looked terrible. His eyes were puffy, and he was wearing the same clothes he had passed out in. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs, sniffing the air. He looked at me standing by the stove, flipping bacon. He looked confused. He was expecting a fight. He was expecting divorce papers. Ebony, he croaked, rubbing his temple. "Good morning, Terrence," I said, turning around with a smile that felt like a mask of glass on my face. "I made breakfast. There is coffee in the pot." He walked into the kitchen, eyeing me suspiciously. "Where is Aisha?" "She is at my mother's," I lied smoothly. "The doctor said she needs a dust-free environment for a few days to recover. Mom has that air filtration system. It is better for her." Terrence nodded, seemingly relieved he did not have to deal with a sick child. He grabbed a piece of bacon. "Look Ebony about last night. I know you were freaking out, but taking her out in the rain was dangerous. You should have just waited." I gripped the spatula tight. I wanted to stab it into the counter. Instead, I lowered my eyes. "You are right, Terrence." He froze mid-chew. "What?" I said you are right, I repeated, forcing my voice to sound small and defeated. "I was hysterical. I overreacted. I mean, she is fine now. It was just a panic attack. I should not have yelled at you. I know you were tired. You have been under a lot of pressure with Brad's business. I was not being supportive." Terrence straightened up. His chest puffed out. A slow, arrogant smile spread across his face. He walked over and kissed my forehead. He smelled like sour mash whiskey. "I am glad you finally see that, babe," he said. "I was worried you were going to go crazy on me. You know I love you. I just need you to be rational. We are a team." Just then, Brad and Latoya shuffled into the kitchen. Brad was scratching his stomach, and Latoya was wearing her sunglasses inside because of the hangover. "What is that smell?" Brad grunted. "Is that bacon?" "Ebony made breakfast," Terrence announced proudly. "And she apologized. She knows she messed up last night." Brad stopped. He looked at me, his blue eyes narrowing, then widening with pure, unadulterated smugness. He let out a loud, barking laugh. He walked over to the island and leaned on it, invading my personal space. "See," he said, pointing a finger in my face. "I told you, Terrence. I told you. Tough love. That is the only thing that works." He turned to Latoya, gesturing at me like I was an exhibit in a zoo. "You have to be firm with these women." He lectured, his voice dripping with condescension. "Especially the educated ones. They get these degrees and they think they are men. They think they run the show. But deep down they crave structure. They want a man to put his foot down. Look at her. She ran out into the rain, acted crazy, realized she could not survive without you, and now she is cooking bacon. That is biology, bro. That is the natural order." I felt a bile rise in my throat, so hot I almost gagged. He was reducing my calculated strategy to a racist, sexist stereotype. He thought he had broken me. I forced myself to smile. I poured Brad a cup of coffee. "You are right, Brad," I said softly. "I was out of line. I disrespected the hierarchy of the house." Brad took the coffee, sipping it loudly. "Damn straight. But hey, apology accepted. Just do not let it happen again. Now pass the eggs." They sat down at the table, my table, right above the listening device. They began to eat like wolves, shoveling my food into their mouths. "Latoya," I said, walking over to my purse. She looked up, a piece of bacon hanging from her mouth. "What?" I pulled out a credit card. It was a silver card from a secondary bank account I kept. It had a limit of $2,000, but to them it looked like freedom. "I am sorry I called the cops about the bag," I said, sliding the card across the table to her. "That was petty. We are family. I want you to feel welcome here. Take this. Get yourself some matching shoes, or whatever you need for the new apartment hunt." Latoya's eyes bulged. She snatched the card so fast she almost knocked over her juice. "For real," she squealed. "Oh my God, Ebony. Finally." She turned to Terrence. "See, I told you she would come around. She just needed to vent." She looked at the card, admiring her reflection in the silver plastic. "Thanks, sis," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "You are the best. I am going to Phipps Plaza as soon as I finish this." Brad leaned back, patting his stomach. He looked at Terrence. "You see this, Terrence? This is what happens when you hold the frame. You assert dominance, she falls in line. Now you have got a happy wife, a fed family, and peace. You should thank me. I saved your marriage." Terrence laughed, high-fiving Brad. "You are a genius man." I stood by the sink, washing the frying pan. I scrubbed the grease, watching them through the reflection in the window. They were eating my food. They were spending my money. They were laughing at my submission. But they did not know that the camera in the outlet was recording every bite. They did not know the microphone under the table was catching every word of Brad's misogynistic rant. And most importantly, they did not know that the silver credit card LaToya was holding was not just a credit card. It was a tracker. And the moment she used it, it would ping the location to my mother's lawyer. I dried my hands. "I am going to the office," I said. "I have some work to catch up on." "You do that, babe?" Terrence said, his mouth full of grits. "Make that money. We have got bills to pay." I walked out of the kitchen. I walked past the living room. I climbed the stairs to my office. I closed the door. I locked it. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up the live feed from the kitchen. On the screen, I saw them. I saw Brad leaning in, whispering something to Terrence. I turned up the volume on my headphones. "Dude," Brad was saying, "since she is in a giving mood, you should get her to sign those loan papers for the startup today. Strike while the iron is hot. She is weak right now. She feels guilty. Use that." Terrence nodded. "Yeah, I will ask her tonight. I will tell her it is for a joint investment." I watched them plotting my financial ruin. I leaned back in my chair. "Come on, Terrence," I whispered to the screen. "Ask me. Forge my signature. Do it." I checked the recording status. System active. The performance was over. The trap was primed. Now all I had to do was wait for the prey to step on the trigger. By Wednesday afternoon, the atmosphere in my house had shifted from hostile to predatory. My calculated submission had worked too well. Brad and LaToya no longer saw me as an obstacle. They saw me as an unlocked vault. They were high on the thrill of my credit card and the smell of my bacon, and now they wanted the main course. I was in the kitchen pretending to organize the pantry when LaToya sashayed in. She was wearing the new shoes she had bought with my silver card, the heels clicking loudly on the hardwood. Brad was right behind her, holding a tablet, looking like a general planning a campaign. "Ebony girl, we need to talk," LaToya said, leaning against the counter. "So Brad and I have been thinking. Our 10th anniversary is coming up this Saturday. We were going to do something small, but since we are all living together now like one big happy family, we should celebrate it here." "Here?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Yeah," Brad interjected, scrolling through his tablet. "This house has great bones. The backyard is perfect for a tent setup. We want to invite about 50 people. Some investors, some influencers, high-value individuals. It is a great networking opportunity for Terrence, too. We need to show them we are living the good life." LaToya nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. We want a caterer, a DJ, an open bar, and floral arrangements. We did the math. It will only cost about $20,000. She said the number casually, as if she were asking for $20 to order a pizza. "20,000, I repeated. "Yeah," Brad said. "And obviously, since we are a little liquid constrained at the moment with the move, we need you to front the cost. Consider it a loan, or better yet, a gift. A thank you gift for bringing so much positive masculine energy into your home." I looked at them. The audacity was breathtaking. They wanted me to fund a party to celebrate a marriage that was currently squatting in my living room. I let out a long, dramatic sigh. I leaned against the counter, looking distressed. "Oh, guys," I said, biting my lip. "That sounds amazing. I would love to do that for you. Really. But I am tapped out." Brad frowned. "What do you mean tapped out? You make bank." "I do," I lied. But I just put all my liquid cash into a high-yield bond yesterday. It is locked up for 6 months. And with the credit card bill for Latoya's bag and the new shoes, I just do not have 20,000 in cash right now. I am so sorry. Latoya's face fell. You are kidding me. You are the CFO. Move some money around. I can't, I whispered. It is all tied up in assets. I literally have maybe $500 in my checking account until next payday. Brad slammed his hand on the counter. Useless. Absolutely useless. We have already sent out the save the dates. We cannot cancel now. We will look like failures. He glared at me with pure disgust. You better figure something out, Ebony. Terrence is going to be very disappointed if his brother-in-law looks broke in front of investors. He stormed out of the kitchen, Latoya following him, muttering about how selfish I was. I waited until they were gone. Then I smiled. I walked up the stairs to my office. I unlocked the door. I went to my safe and pulled out a thick manila folder. It was my 401k statement. The real one. It showed a balance of $512,000. It also contained the withdrawal forms. I took a red pen. I circled the total balance. Then I placed the folder right in the center of my mahogany desk. I opened it slightly so the number $512,000 was visible to anyone who walked in. Next to it, I placed a pen. I walked over to the door. I turned the lock mechanism so it would look locked from the outside, but would actually pop open with a gentle push. I grabbed my purse and walked downstairs. I am going to the grocery store, I yelled up the stairs. I will be back in an hour. I walked out the front door, got into my rental car, and drove down the street. I parked around the corner, pulled out my phone, and opened the security camera app. It took less than 5 minutes. On the screen, I saw the door to my office push open. Brad walked in, looking around suspiciously. He saw the folder. He walked over to the desk. I watched his eyes widen as he looked at the number. Latoya, he hissed. Get Terrence up here. Now. I watched as the three of them gathered around my desk like vultures around a carcass. I saw Terrence pick up the paper. I saw Brad pointing at the withdrawal form. I saw Latoya smiling. They thought they had found a gold mine. They did not know they had just found the detonator to their own destruction. I sat in the driver's seat of my rental car parked 3 blocks away from my own house. The engine was off. The windows were rolled up. The only light came from the glow of my tablet screen resting on the steering wheel. I felt like a hunter in a deer stand waiting for the buck to step into the clearing. My heart was not pounding with fear anymore. It was beating with the slow, rhythmic precision of a predator. On the screen, the 4K live feed from my home office was crisp and clear. The trap I had laid 30 minutes ago was sitting right there in the center of the frame. The manila folder containing my 401k statement was open, the withdrawal form was peeking out, and the bait, a balance of over $500,000, was circled in red ink. I did not have to wait long. The door on the screen pushed open. Brad walked in first. He did not knock. He did not hesitate. He walked into my private sanctuary with the entitlement of a king entering his treasury. He was holding a glass of my expensive scotch in one hand. Terrence trailed behind him, looking nervous. His shoulders were hunched, and he kept glancing back at the hallway, as if he expected me to jump out of the shadows. Brad walked straight to the desk. He saw the folder. He picked it up. I watched his eyes widen. I saw the exact moment greed replaced whatever shred of morality he might have had left. He whistled low and long. Look at this, Terrence, Brad said, holding the paper up to the light. $512,000. Your wife is sitting on a gold mine and she is crying about a $20,000 party. Terrence walked over and took the paper. His hands were shaking slightly. That is her retirement fund, Brad. She has been saving that since she was 22. She says it is for our old age. Brad snatched the paper back and slammed it onto the desk. Old age. Terrence, look at you. You are aging right now because of the stress of being broke. We need capital now. My startup needs an injection. This party needs to happen to impress the investors. If we get this money, we can flip it into 2 million by next year. She is thinking small. We are thinking big. But it is in her name, Terrence whispered. He looked at the withdrawal form. It requires a signature, a notarized signature. Brad laughed. He walked around the desk and sat in my chair. He spun around, putting his feet up on my mahogany desk, right on top of my quarterly reports. Notarized. Please. I know a guy. He will stamp anything for $50. The only thing missing is the signature. Brad picked up the pen I had left next to the folder. He held it out to Terrence. Sign it, Brad commanded. Terrence took a step back. I can't do that. That is forgery. If she finds out, she will leave me. Brad stood up. He walked around the desk and put a heavy hand on Terrence's shoulder. He leaned in close. The microphone I had hidden in the lamp picked up every wet syllable of his whisper. She is not going to leave you, Terrence. She is obsessed with you. Look at how she cooked breakfast this morning after you treated her like dirt last night. She is weak. She craves your approval. And besides, she is not going to check this account. She said it herself. She put her cash in bonds. She is not looking at this fund. Terrence stared at the pen. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted the money. He wanted the approval of this white man he admired so much. But he was terrified of the consequences. I do not know, Brad Terrence stammered. It feels risky. Brad's face hardened. He dropped the friendly act. His voice became cold and sharp like a knife. You know what is risky, Terrence. Being a broke man in a house owned by a woman. You are losing control. If you do not take charge of the finances, you are just a guest here. Is that what you want? Do you want to be her pet for the rest of your life? He shoved the pen into Terrence's chest. Sign the paper. Transfer $50,000 to your account for the party. Transfer another $100,000 to my LLC for the investment. We will pay it back before she even notices. Terrence took the pen. He looked at the document. Ebony is smart, though, Terrence muttered. She checks the statements. Brad let out a harsh, cruel laugh. That was the line. That was the moment he sealed his fate. Your wife is stupid. Terrence. Brad sneered, looking directly at the camera without knowing it. She thinks she is smart because she has a degree, but she has no street smarts. She let us move in. She gave LaToya a credit card. She is desperate to be loved. She will not know. And even if she does notice, just tell her you moved it to a better fund. She believes anything you say. Brad paused and grinned a smile that made my skin crawl. Just sign it. Consider it a management fee. I have been teaching her how to be a submissive wife. I have been teaching you how to be a man. That kind of education costs money. This is just my tuition. A management fee. I sat in my car and felt a cold smile spread across my face. He called grand larceny a management fee. On the screen, Terrence took a deep breath. He looked at the door. He looked at the money. Then he bent down. I held my breath. The recording light on my screen blinked red. Terrence pressed the pen to the paper. I watched as he carefully practiced my signature on a scrap piece of paper first. He tried once. He tried twice. Then, confident that he had mastered the curve of my E, he moved to the official form. He signed my name. He dated it. He checked the box for a lump sum withdrawal. Got it. Terrence said, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. Brad clapped him on the back. That is my boy. That is what a CEO does. You make executive decisions. Now give me that. I will run it over to my notary guy tonight. We will have the cash by Friday, just in time for the party. Brad took the paper. He folded it and put it in his pocket. They high-fived. They actually high-fived over the felony they had just committed. I reached out and pressed the save button on my tablet. The video file saved to the cloud. I made a backup copy. I sent another copy directly to Mama Estella's lawyer. I leaned back in the seat and exhaled a long breath. They thought they had just stolen $150,000. But what they had actually done was sign a confession to wire fraud, identity theft, and criminal conspiracy. Terrence had just signed his own arrest warrant. And Brad had just become an accessory to a federal crime. I started the car engine. The vibration felt good against my hands. "I am coming home, boys," I whispered to the screen. "And I hope you enjoy that scotch, because it is the last drink you will ever have as free men." I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. The sun was setting over Atlanta, casting long shadows on the street. But for me, the sun was just rising. The countdown had begun. Saturday night was going to be a bloodbath. Friday morning arrived with a sky that was painfully blue, a stark contrast to the storm that was brewing inside my life. I dragged my Louis Vuitton carry-on suitcase down the stairs, the wheels bumping against the hardwood with a rhythm that sounded like a war drum. I was dressed in my travel clothes, a beige trench coat and oversized sunglasses, looking every bit the stressed corporate executive rushing to a crisis meeting. In reality, the suitcase was not packed with business suits. It was packed with every piece of jewelry I owned: my birth certificate, my passport, and the hard drives containing the backup footage of my house. I was not just going on a trip. I was evacuating the premises before the demolition began. Terrence was in the kitchen, already on the phone with the party planner. He barely looked up when I entered. "I have to go, Terrence," I said, injecting a note of frantic energy into my voice. "The Chicago merger is falling apart. The board needs me on the ground immediately. I might be gone until Sunday." Terrence covered the receiver of his phone and gave me a thumbs up. A thumbs up. Not a kiss goodbye. Not a safe travels. Just a gesture of dismissal. "Cool, babe," he whispered. "Handle business. We will hold down the fort here. Good luck with the merger." He turned back to his call, talking loudly about ordering top-shelf tequila. He was relieved. My absence meant he did not have to hide his drinking. It meant Brad and LaToya could run wild without my judgment. It meant they could pretend the house was fully theirs for 48 hours. I walked out the front door and got into my rental car. I did not look back. I did not feel sad. The house looked beautiful in the morning light, but to me it was just a crime scene waiting to be processed. I drove 20 minutes into the heart of the city, pulling into the underground garage of a glass skyscraper. I took the private elevator up to the 45th floor. The doors opened into a lobby that smelled of old money and fresh lilies. This was the law firm of Henderson, Vance and Associates. The Vance on the wall was my grandfather. The power in the room was my mother. Mama Estella was sitting at the head of a massive conference table made of black marble. To her right sat Mr. Henderson, the most ruthless litigator in the state. He was a man who smiled with his mouth, but never with his eyes. On the table sat a binder. It was thick, at least 4 inches of paperwork. "Ebony, sit," Mama Estella said. I sat down. Mr. Henderson pushed the binder toward me. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. "This is the complaint," Mrs. Vance Henderson said, his voice smooth as silk. "It is 212 pages. We have cataloged everything. The unauthorized use of the Range Rover, the theft of the credit card, the destruction of personal property, the emotional distress, and thanks to your video from yesterday, the wire fraud and identity theft." He flipped the binder open. "We are not filing for divorce in family court," he explained. "We are filing a civil RICO suit against your husband and his brother-in-law for conspiring to defraud a corporate entity. That allows us to freeze their assets immediately. But that is just the appetizer." Mama Estella leaned forward. Her eyes were hard as flint. "Tell her the rest, Henderson." Henderson nodded. "The video you captured of Terrence forging your signature is clear evidence of a federal crime. Since the amount exceeds $100,000 and involves wire transfer, it falls under federal jurisdiction. But we also have the state charges for the vehicle." He paused, looking at me to make sure I understood the gravity of what was coming. "We are not just suing them, Ebony. We are destroying their ability to ever function in society again." I ran my hand over the leather cover of the binder. I thought about Aisha gasping for air. I thought about Brad laughing at me. Do it, I said. File it all. Mama Estella nodded. Good. Now for the logistics. She picked up her phone. She did not dial 911. She did not dial the local precinct. She tapped a contact saved as Sheriff Miller Personal. I watched her. Sheriff Miller was not just a lawman. He was a man whose campaign my mother had funded for the last 3 election cycles. They played chess together on Sundays. Hello, Richard? Mama said into the phone. Her voice was warm, but there was steel underneath. It is Estella. Yes, the family is well. Listen, Richard, I need a favor, but it is strictly official business. She paused, listening. I have a situation at my property on Highland Drive tomorrow night. We have clear evidence of grand larceny fraud and unauthorized occupation. I am executing a repossession order and a citizen's arrest, but I need backup to make it stick. She listened again, then her eyes narrowed. No, Richard. Do not send a patrol car. I do not want 2 rookies showing up and treating this like a domestic squabble. I want the special response team. I want the asset forfeiture unit. These are criminals who have stolen corporate property and crossed state lines. I want a show of force. I want them to understand that they have messed with the wrong family. She smiled, a cold, terrifying smile. Yes. 9 p.m. tomorrow. The party will be in full swing. It will be the perfect time to make an example. Thank you, Richard. I will see you at church on Sunday. She hung up the phone and looked at me. It is done, she said. You are not going to Chicago, Ebony. You are going to the Four Seasons. You are going to get a massage. You are going to get your hair done. You are going to buy a dress that looks like blood and fire. And tomorrow night, you are going to walk into that party, not as a wife, but as the owner. I stood up. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. I looked at the binder. I looked at my mother. I picked up the file. I will see you tomorrow, Mama, I said. I walked out of the office. I felt lighter than I had in years. The air in the elevator tasted like ozone, the smell before a lightning strike. My husband and his family were currently blowing up balloons and ordering kegs of beer thinking they were celebrating their anniversary. They had no idea they were decorating their own funeral. And I was going to be the one to deliver the eulogy. Saturday night arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. My driveway, usually a sanctuary of quiet suburban dignity, had been transformed into a cheap nightclub. From my vantage point down the street, sitting in the darkened rental car, I could feel the bass from the rented speakers vibrating in my chest. I did not need to be inside to see the train wreck unfolding. The hidden cameras I had planted were broadcasting every nauseating detail to my tablet in crisp, high definition. The feed showed a scene of absolute delusional excess. Brad had truly outdone himself. He was wearing a white tuxedo jacket with black lapels, looking like a budget version of a movie villain. He held a glass of my expensive champagne in one hand and a cigar in the other, ash falling onto my pristine Persian rug. He was sweating profusely, the humidity of the Atlanta night clinging to him, but he strutted through the crowd with the confidence of a man who actually paid the mortgage. LaToya was right beside him, playing the role of the doting trophy wife. She was draped in rhinestone jewelry that sparkled aggressively under the strobe lights, pieces she undoubtedly claimed were real diamonds. She clutched the stolen green Gucci bag against her hip, like a shield, flashing it at every guest who walked by. I zoomed in on the feed. The guests were a mix of Brad's rowdy college friends and a few legitimate local business owners they were trying to scam. I watched as Brad gathered a group of potential investors in the foyer. "Welcome to the estate," Brad boomed, his voice picked up clearly by the microphone under the table. "We just closed on this place last month. It was a foreclosure, got it for a steal, but we put about 200 grand into renovations. Open concept custom finishes. I designed the home office myself. You know, a CEO needs a command center." I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The audacity was breathtaking. He was taking credit for the architecture I had paid for with my blood, sweat, and tears. He was claiming ownership of the walls that protected him from the elements. Then the tour moved outside. I watched on the screen as Brad led the group to the driveway. The Range Rover was parked front and center, spotlighted by a portable floodlight they had rented. It had been freshly washed, likely by Terrence, and polished until it shone like black glass. Brad leaned against the hood, the metal buckling slightly under his weight. He scratched the paint with his cufflinks, oblivious to the damage. "And this, gentleman," Brad announced, patting the roof of my car. "This is a little push present for the wifey. Range Rover autobiography. Paid cash. That is how we do business at Vance Logistics. We do not finance. We own." The crowd cheered. Men slapped him on the back. LaToya squealed and kissed his cheek. And there in the background stood my husband. Terrence was nodding along, smiling that weak, pathetic smile, complicit in the charade. He was letting another man claim his wife's success, letting another man steal his dignity just to feel like part of the club. I looked at the digital clock on my dashboard. The numbers glowed a soft green. 8:59. Inside the house, the music was reaching a crescendo. Corks were popping. They were toasting to success. They were toasting to the future. They were toasting to the $150,000 they thought they had successfully stolen from my retirement fund. I rolled down my window. The night air was thick and heavy. Then, exactly as the digits on the clock flipped to 900, the atmosphere shifted. It started as a low rumble, different from the bass of the music. It was the sound of heavy tires on asphalt. At the end of the long, dark street, the convoy appeared. It was not one patrol car. It was not two. It was a phalanx. 6 blacked-out SUVs, flanked by 2 marked sheriff cruisers, turned the corner in perfect formation. They did not use sirens. They did not want to warn the prey. They came in silent, like a pack of wolves stalking a wounded deer. As they approached the driveway, the lead vehicle hit the lights. Blue and red strobe lights cut through the darkness, washing over the house. The festive party lights were instantly drowned out by the harsh, authoritative glare of law enforcement. The white tuxedo Brad was wearing turned into a flickering canvas of police colors. I saw guests stop dancing. I saw heads turn toward the windows. I saw the smile drop from Brad's face on the camera feed. The party was over. The raid had begun. And I put my car in drive, ready to take my front row seat for the show. The strobe lights sliced through the humid night air like blades cutting through the fog of their delusion. The DJ cut the music instantly, leaving a silence that was sudden and violent. One moment, the bass was shaking the windows, and the next, the only sound was the crackle of police radios and the nervous murmurs of 50 guests who suddenly realized they were partying at a crime scene. The blockade was absolute. The special response team had formed a perimeter that not even a mouse could slip through. I watched from the back seat of the Rolls-Royce as Brad's investors, the men he had been trying to impress with his stolen lifestyle, began to back away, looking for exits that did not exist. They looked terrified, but they were not looking at the police. They were looking at the vehicle that was slowly rolling through the parted sea of squad cars. I did not arrive in a police cruiser. I arrived in Mama Estella's vintage Silver Cloud Rolls-Royce, a car that cost more than the entire net worth of every person standing on that lawn combined. The chauffeur, a man who had driven for my family since I was a child, stopped the car precisely in front of the stolen Range Rover. The door opened. I stepped out. I was not wearing the sensible beige pantsuits Terrence preferred, because he said they made me look approachable. I was wearing crimson. A floor-length, blood-red silk gown that hugged every curve of my body and slit high up the thigh. It was a dress that screamed power. It was a dress that announced war. My makeup was sharp enough to cut glass a dark berry lip and a winged liner that gave me the eyes of a falcon spotting its prey. A hush fell over the driveway. I heard a gasp from someone in the crowd. They barely recognized me. The tired, overworked wife who cooked bacon and apologized for existing was gone. In her place stood the owner. I walked toward the house. My 6-inch Louboutins hit the asphalt with a rhythmic, confident click that echoed in the silence. I did not look at the guests. I looked straight at the front door. Terrence broke through the line of stunned guests. He was sweating through his shirt, his eyes wide and frantic. He looked at the police, then he looked at me, and his brain seemed to short-circuit. He ran toward me, waving his hands as if he could physically shoo away the reality of what was happening. "Ebony," he hissed, his voice cracking with panic. "What the hell are you doing? Are you crazy? This is a party. We have investors here. You are embarrassing me in front of everyone. Tell them to leave. Tell them it is a mistake." He reached for my arm, trying to pull me into the shadows, trying to hide me. I pulled my arm back. I did not flinch. I did not shout. I looked him dead in the eye, and for the first time in 10 years I saw him for what he truly was. Small, weak, and terrified. I adjusted the diamond bracelet on my wrist, the light catching the stones and blinding him for a second. "The party is over, Terrence," I said, my voice projecting clearly so that Brad, LaToya, and every single guest could hear me. Terrence stammered. "Over? What do you mean, over? It is barely 9 o'clock. We are celebrating." I took a step closer to him, forcing him to step back toward the police line. "We are not celebrating," I said, my voice cold as liquid nitrogen. "We are executing an eviction. And this is not your house. It never was." I signaled to the sheriff standing behind me. "Get them off my property." Mr. Henderson, the lead attorney for the Vance Family Trust, stepped out from behind the wall of police officers. He adjusted his glasses and opened the thick leather binder he was carrying. He did not shout. He did not need to. His voice was projected by the silence of 50 terrified guests. Mr. Terrence Vance and Mr. Bradley Stevenson Henderson began reading from the document with the dry precision of an executioner. "This property is owned by the Estella Family Trust. By moving unauthorized tenants into the premises and conducting commercial activities without a permit, you have breached the occupancy contract. The trust has exercised its right to immediate eviction. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises before you are charged with criminal trespassing." Brad laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "You cannot evict us. We have squatters' rights. We have been here for a week. This is a civil matter." Henderson turned the page. Regarding the matter of the Range Rover autobiography, Henderson continued, ignoring Brad completely. "That vehicle is the property of Vance Logistics International. Mr. Stevenson, you were recorded driving said vehicle across state lines to a casino in Alabama last night. That is unauthorized use of a motor vehicle and interstate transportation of stolen property. That is a federal felony." Brad's face went white. And finally Henderson said, looking directly at Terrence, "Mr. Vance, at 4:30 p.m. yesterday, you were recorded forging the signature of Mrs. Ebony Vance on a wire transfer document for the sum of $150,000. We have the video. We have the document. We have the digital footprint. That is wire fraud and identity theft." "Officers," Henderson said, closing the binder. "Execute the warrants." The wall of blue uniforms moved forward. "No," Brad screamed. He dropped his cigar and lunged toward Henderson, his face twisted in ugly rage. "You cannot touch me. I am a citizen. I have rights. This is entrapment. Do not touch me." He raised a fist, swinging wildly. It was a mistake. 2 officers tackled him instantly. The sound of his body hitting the asphalt was sickeningly loud. His white tuxedo jacket tore at the shoulder as they pinned him face down. The guests gasped, stepping back as Brad screamed obscenities into the dirt, the handcuffs clicking shut around his wrists with a final metallic snap. Terrence did not fight. He stood there paralyzed, watching his hero being dragged through the mud. LaToya let out a shriek that pierced the night air. She ran toward me, her fake diamonds rattling. "You monster!" she screamed, pointing a manicured finger in my face. "How could you do this? We are family. You set us up. You are evil, Ebony. You are a cold-hearted witch. You want to ruin my husband and my brother because you are jealous. You are jealous because you are barren and bitter, and nobody loves you. She looked around at the crowd playing the victim perfectly. She hates us, Latoya sobbed loudly. She hates my daughter. She hates that we are happy. She is trying to destroy a black family. The crowd murmured. Some people looked at me with uncertainty. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I simply walked over to the DJ booth, which had been abandoned by the terrified DJ. I pulled the auxiliary cord from the mixer and plugged it into my phone. You want to talk about hate, Latoya? I said into the microphone. Let us hear what you really think about family. I pressed play on the audio file I had isolated from the bathroom recording 2 days ago. Latoya's voice boomed out of the massive speakers, clear and undeniable. God, that kid is so annoying. I wish she would just shut up and stop wheezing. Ebony acts like her daughter is dying, but honestly, if something happened to that brat, at least we would get the sympathy money. Then we could finally take over the house for real. The recording ended. The silence in the driveway was absolute. Even Brad stopped screaming in the back of the police car. Every single guest looked at Latoya. The disgust on their faces was palpable. She had just been exposed not as a victim, but as a woman who wished death on a child for financial gain. Latoya's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She looked at the crowd. She looked at Terrence. She looked at me. And for the first time in her life, she had absolutely nothing to say. The second wave of the assault began not with sirens, but with the heavy boots of the repossession team. These were not careful movers hired to pack crystal and china into bubble wrap. They were an eviction squad hired by Mama Estella with specific instructions to clear the premises of unauthorized property immediately. They marched into the house past the stunned police officers and began hurling items out the front door like bags of garbage. Latoya's wardrobe came first. Armfuls of sequins, feathers, and polyester flew through the air, landing in a chaotic pile on the manicured fescue grass. Brad's beloved gaming setup followed the curved monitor, crashing onto the soft earth, followed by a tangle of expensive cables and headsets. It was a mountain of materialism being reduced to a landfill in real time. And then, as if choreographed by fate itself, the automatic sprinkler system hissed to life. Thousands of gallons of water erupted from the ground in rhythmic pulsing arcs. The timing was impeccable. It was 9:15, the exact time Terrence had set the timer for weeks ago to keep the lawn green for his image. Now that same water was soaking his sister's life into a soggy mess. Latoya let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. She watched as her collection of handbags, the ones she had flaunted all night, was drenched, and under the harsh glare of the police floodlights, the truth washed away with the water. The dye on her so-called Hermes bag began to run, bleeding a cheap synthetic green onto the grass. The cardboard structure inside her designer totes collapsed, revealing them for the knockoffs they truly were. The guests, the influencers, and investors Brad had tried so hard to impress did not offer to help. Instead, they pulled out their phones. I saw the glow of screens, the flash of cameras. They were live streaming the downfall. I could hear snippets of their commentary over the sound of the sprinklers. Yo, check this out, Brad got busted. Everything is fake. They are getting evicted live. The social currency Brad and Latoya had hoarded was evaporating faster than the water on the pavement. They were not just broke, they were a viral joke. 2 deputies grabbed Terrence by the arms to lead him toward the squad car. He stumbled, his expensive loafers slipping on the wet driveway. He looked broken. The arrogance that had fueled him for years was gone, replaced by the terrified realization that there was no one left to bail him out. He twisted his body, fighting against the grip of the officers, desperate to make eye contact with me. Ebony, he screamed, his voice raw and desperate. Ebony, please, stop this. Tell them to stop. I am your husband. We are partners. You cannot let them take me. I am your husband. I stood by the door of the Rolls-Royce, the red silk of my dress blowing gently in the wind. I looked at the man who had forged my name. I looked at the man who had chosen sleep over our daughter's life. I looked at the man who had let his family treat me like a servant in my own home. I felt absolutely nothing. The love I had nursed for 10 years had not just died. It had been evicted along with his trash on the lawn. I leaned forward slightly, just enough for him to see the cold finality in my eyes. "My lawyer will meet you at the county jail, Terrence," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "And do not worry about the bail money. I used it to buy this dress." The deputy shoved him into the back of the cruiser. He pressed his face against the glass, screaming silent words that no one cared to hear. I turned my back on him. I turned my back on the house. I turned my back on the ruin of their lives. "Let's go," I said to the driver. As the heavy door of the Rolls-Royce clicked shut, sealing me in the quiet luxury of my freedom, I did not look back at the flashing lights. I looked forward into the dark open road. The nightmare was over. And for the first time in a decade, I was finally awake. 6 months have passed since the night the blue lights flushed the parasites out of my life. I stood in my corner office on the 45th floor, looking down at the sprawling skyline of Atlanta. The nameplate on my desk no longer gathered dust in a drawer. It sat, front and center, reading Ebony Vance, Chief Financial Officer. I had stopped hiding my success. I had stopped shrinking myself to make a small man feel big. I checked my watch. It was time. I grabbed my purse and walked out, nodding to my assistant. I decided to take the scenic route to the restaurant, driving my brand-new pearl-white Mercedes G-Wagon. As I passed the Peachtree Center subway station, the very spot where I had stood in the rain with my children, I slowed down. There was a work crew on the sidewalk wearing bright orange vests emblazoned with the words, "Community Service." And there they were. Brad was holding a trash bag, looking sunburned and miserable, picking up cigarette butts from the gutter. The arrogance was gone, scrubbed away by 6 months of court-ordered labor and a felony record that would follow him forever. And next to him was Terrence. My ex-husband was sweeping the concrete, his head hung low. He looked older. He looked tired. He looked up as my engine purred past him. Our eyes met through the tinted glass. He stopped sweeping, his mouth opening slightly, as he recognized the car, recognized the woman behind the wheel. I did not honk. I did not wave. I did not feel a surge of anger or a pang of regret. I just felt a profound, peaceful indifference. He was just a ghost in an orange vest, a part of my history that I had already rewritten. I drove on. A few miles away, at the discount grocery store, I knew LaToya was currently clocking in for her evening shift as a cashier. The court had garnished her wages to pay back the credit card debt and the damages to my property. She was finally learning the value of $1 barcode scan at a time. I pulled up to the curb of the steakhouse. Mama Estella was waiting for me. She was not dressed in her disguise today. She was wearing a cream-colored suit and holding a bouquet of orchids. I unlocked the doors and she slid into the passenger seat. She looked at me, her eyes crinkling with pride. "You are late, CEO," she teased. I laughed, the sound light and free. "I was taking the scenic route, Mama. I wanted to check on the city." "It looks cleaner today." Mama Estella smiled, knowing exactly what I meant. "It certainly does, baby. It certainly does." I put the car in drive. The engine roared to life, powerful and responsive under my hands. I looked at the road ahead. It was wide open. There were no obstacles, no dead weight dragging me down. As we merged onto the highway, I realized something. For 10 years I had let Terrence drive. I had let him navigate even though he was blind to our destination. I had sat in the passenger seat of my own existence, hoping he would not crash us. Never again. I gripped the steering wheel, feeling the leather warm under my palms. This is my car, this is my road, and this is my life. And as I accelerated toward the sunset, I whispered the promise I would keep for the rest of my days. Never let anyone drive your life, Ebony, even if they are sitting in the passenger seat. This story is a brutal reminder that financial abuse often disguises itself as tradition or partnership. Ebony thought that by dimming her light, she could save her marriage, but she learned that you cannot build a home with someone who is actively stealing the bricks. The most important lesson here is that silence is not a virtue when it comes to your dignity. Real power is not just having money, it is having the courage to protect it and the boundaries to say no. We teach people how to treat us, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to revoke access to those who use you. If you believe that you are the driver of your own destiny, and that respect is the only currency that matters, hit that like button and share this story with someone who needs to take back the keys to their life. Subscribe for more stories about resilience, justice, and the power of walking away.